I asked about the family trip. My daughter said, "You're not coming." Those words hit me harder than I ever imagined. I had thought we were close, that she would share the excitement with me. But in that single moment, I felt invisible, shut out and replaced. My heart ached, but I stayed calm. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. Instead, I watched her carefully, noticing her hesitation, her unease. Something about that night told me this wasn't just a disagreement about a trip. It was something much deeper, and it was about to change everything. Before I tell you how I got there, I want to take a moment just for us. Thank you for pausing your day and sitting with me. It means more than you know. If this story touches you, even a little, please like the video. It helps these real stories reach more hearts. And if you'd like to hear more tales about family, love, and life lessons, consider subscribing. There's no rush, no pressure, just an invitation to share these quiet, honest moments together as we go through this story. My name is Angela Walker. I am a mother before I am anything else, and for most of my life, that was enough. I raised my son, Daniel Walker, on my own after his father passed away when Daniel was just 12. We did not have much back then. I worked long hours, saved carefully, and learned how to stretch $1 into 10. Daniel grew up watching me live simply. No fancy clothes, no big vacations, no loud celebrations, just quiet stability. Over time, my career changed. I moved into a senior role at a logistics firm. Promotions came slowly, then suddenly. My income grew a lot, but my lifestyle never did. I still lived in the same modest home. I still cooked my own meals. I still wore the same coats year after year. I never told Daniel how much I earned, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't want money to change how he saw me or how others treated me. Daniel married Emily Carter 3 years ago. Emily was polite, always smiling, always careful with her words. She came from a very different background. Her parents, Richard and Susan Carter, lived abroad most of the year. They were well-spoken, well-dressed, and very proud of their status. They talked about investments, private schools, and proper circles. From the beginning, I felt small around them, not poor, just invisible. Emily never said anything directly unkind to me, but there were moments, small ones, the kind people dismiss, but your heart remembers. She would correct my pronunciation in front of others. She would gently suggest better restaurants I could never afford, at least that's what she assumed. She would speak slowly to me, like I might not understand. Daniel never noticed. Or maybe he didn't want to. When Emily told us her parents were coming to visit from overseas, she was nervous. She cleaned the house twice. She rehearsed conversations. She worried about impressions. I tried to stay out of the way. Then one afternoon, Daniel called me. "Mom," he said, "Emily's parents want to have dinner together. All of us. Just once while they're here." I smiled on the phone. "That sounds lovely." There was a pause. "They chose the place," he added. "It's a bit upscale, I understand," I said softly. Another pause. "Mom, you'll be okay, right?" That question stayed with me. Not "are you excited?" Not "are you happy?" But "you'll be okay." That night, I stood in front of my mirror, holding two dresses. One was elegant, simple, expensive, though no one would guess. The other was plain, old, comfortable. I chose the plain one. I did not plan revenge. I did not plan humiliation. I only wanted to observe. I wanted to see how they treated someone they believed had nothing to offer. The restaurant was already buzzing when I arrived. Soft lights, crystal glasses, quiet confidence in the air. The kind of place where people don't check prices. Emily greeted me first. "Oh, you wore that," she said, smiling quickly. "It's cozy." Daniel hugged me warmly. "You look fine, Mom." Her parents stood when I approached. Richard looked me up and down before shaking my hand. "Angela, yes?" Susan smiled politely, her eyes already moving on. We sat. The conversation started light. Travel, weather, business abroad. I listened more than I spoke. When I did speak, Richard nodded without interest. Susan interrupted gently. Emily ordered wine without asking if I wanted any. When the waiter came to me, I hesitated. I'll just have water, I said. Richard raised an eyebrow. Just water? Yes, I replied. Emily smiled again. Mom prefers simple things. Something inside me settled. The evening continued like that. Small comments, small exclusions. When the bill came, Richard reached for it immediately. No need, he said, glancing at me. We'll take care of it. Daniel didn't argue. Emily didn't look at me. I thanked them quietly. As we stood to leave, Susan leaned closer to me and said, softly but clearly, you must be very proud of Daniel. He's done quite well for himself. I met her eyes. Yes, I said, he truly has. That night, when I got home, I sat in silence for a long time. I realized something important. They didn't see me. They saw a role, a poor mother, an obligation, a background detail, and I wondered, if they knew who I really was, would it change anything? That question stayed with me, and soon, I would get my answer. After that dinner, something inside me shifted, not anger, not bitterness, just awareness. I went to bed that night thinking I would sleep it off, but I didn't. My mind kept replaying small moments from the evening. The way Richard barely looked at me when I spoke, the way Susan smiled without warmth, the way Emily spoke about me instead of to me. None of it was loud. That's what made it worse. The next morning, Daniel called. Mom, did you get home okay? Yes, I said. I did. There was relief in his voice. Good. Emily's parents enjoyed the dinner. I'm glad, I replied. Then he added casually, they're planning a few outings while they're here. Museums, shopping, maybe a short trip. That sounds nice, I said. Another pause. I don't think you'd enjoy those kinds of things, Mom. They can be a lot. I closed my eyes for a moment. I understand, I said. And just like that, I was quietly removed from the picture. Over the next few days, I heard about their plans through Daniel. Never directly invited, never directly excluded either. Just gently pushed to the side. They went to a private gallery today. They're visiting a resort this weekend. They booked a wine tasting. Each sentence came with the same tone. This isn't for you. Emily stopped calling me entirely. When I visited their home to drop off something Daniel had forgotten at my place, she seemed surprised to see me. Oh, Angela, she said, we weren't expecting you. I'll just be a moment, I replied. She stood in the doorway. Instead of inviting me in, inside, I could hear her parents laughing. Richard's voice carried. This neighborhood is modest, Susan laughed. Very. Emily glanced back at them, then at me. We're actually about to head out. I'll leave this here, I said, placing the envelope on the table just inside the door. She didn't offer me tea. She didn't ask how I was. She thanked me politely and closed the door a little too quickly. As I walked back to my car, I realized something painful. I wasn't just ignored. I was being managed. They were careful around me, controlled, like I might embarrass them without meaning to. The realization stayed with me longer than I expected. A few days later, Daniel invited me over for lunch. Just the two of us, he said. Emily and her parents would be out. When I arrived, Daniel looked tired. Mom, he said, hugging me. I'm glad you came. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I once helped him with homework, where I listened to his dreams, where I watched him grow. I wanted to ask you something, he said carefully. I nodded. Did you feel uncomfortable at dinner? I considered my words. I felt like a guest, I said slowly. Not family, he sighed. They didn't mean anything by it, I'm sure, I replied. He leaned forward. Emily's parents have certain expectations. They come from a different world. I understand that too, I said. Mom, he continued, I hope you don't take things personally. I looked at him then. Really looked, my love, I said gently. When people show you who they are, you don't have to take it personally. For it to hurt, he didn't answer. Lunch passed quietly after that. As I left, he hugged me again. Longer this time. like he felt something slipping but didn't know how to stop it. The following week, Emily called me. Her voice was cheerful. Too cheerful, Angela. I wanted to let you know we're planning a family dinner before my parents leave. That's kind of you, I said. Well, she added quickly, it'll be just immediate family, Daniel and me. My parents, I waited, and you, she said, almost as an afterthought. Where will it be? I asked. The Grand Terrace, she replied. It's quite formal. I'll be there, I said. She hesitated. You don't have to feel pressured. We understand if it's not comfortable for you. I'll be there, I repeated. That night, I made a decision not to reveal anything. Not yet, but to stay exactly as they believed me to be, a simple woman, a quiet mother, someone with nothing to offer but love. The second dinner was worse than the first. This time, there was no pretending. Susan asked Emily about her plans to redecorate the house. Richard spoke about moving Daniel into better opportunities. She's done well, he said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. Raising him, I mean. Given the circumstances, I smiled politely. Emily discussed private schools for future children. Public education can be limiting, she said. Glancing at me, I said nothing. When the check arrived, Emily spoke first. We've got it, she said quickly, placing her hand over the folder. Susan nodded approvingly. Of course, she said. It wouldn't be fair otherwise. Daniel shifted in his seat. I watched him struggle, caught between worlds, between loyalty and comfort, and I stayed silent. After dinner. As we stood to leave, Susan pulled Emily aside. She didn't whisper, "You've done well," she said. "He comes from humble roots, but he's risen beautifully." I felt the words land like stones. Humble roots. That night, I cried for the first time in years, not because I was insulted, but because my son heard it and said nothing. The days after were quiet. Daniel didn't call as often. Emily didn't call at all. The visit was coming to an end, and I felt like I was being slowly erased from the story of their family. Then came the phone call. "Mom," Daniel said, hesitant. "Emily's parents invited us on a short trip before they leave." "That's nice," I said. "They booked everything already." I waited. They thought it might be awkward if you came. There it was, not cruel, just final. "I see," I said. "Mom, it's okay," I interrupted gently. Truly, after the call, I sat alone in my living room. I looked around at the life I had built, the home I owned outright, the quiet success I never displayed, the truth no one asked for, and for the first time I wondered, what if silence was no longer kindness? What if protecting others from discomfort was costing me my dignity? The night before their trip, Emily sent me a message. "We hope you understand. It's just easier this way, easier." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a folder on my desk, one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents, statements, proof of a life no one knew about. I didn't smile. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired, tired of shrinking, tired of being polite at the cost of self-respect, tired of watching my son slowly learn to overlook me. I wasn't planning revenge, but I was done pretending, and soon, very soon, they would learn exactly who they had been talking down to. I did not sleep that night, not because I was angry, but because something inside me had finally gone still. You know that feeling? When you stop arguing with reality, when you stop hoping people will suddenly become kinder, when you accept that silence has already said enough. That was me. I sat at my small kitchen table as the clock ticked past midnight. The house was quiet, too quiet. I made myself a cup of tea I barely touched. My hands rested on the table, folded, steady. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was clear. For years, I had lived a simple life by choice. I liked waking up early. I liked cooking my own meals. I liked walking instead of driving when I could. Money had never impressed me. It still didn't, but respect did, and somewhere along the way, people had confused my humility with weakness. I stood up and walked into my study. The small room held a single bookshelf, a desk, and a filing cabinet tucked neatly in the corner. I pulled the bottom drawer open. The sound of the metal sliding out felt louder than it should have. Inside were folders, clean, organized, untouched for years, bank statements, investment summaries, property documents, company shares, a life no one asked about. I picked up the first folder and placed it on the desk. Then another, not to admire them, not to prove anything to myself, but because soon I would need them, not to hurt anyone, but to stop being invisible. The next morning, Daniel called. His voice sounded distracted, excited. "Mom, we're heading out today," he said. "Emily's parents planned everything. It's supposed to be really nice. I hope you enjoy it," I replied. There was a pause. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said honestly. "I always am." He laughed softly, relieved. "I'll call you when we get back." After we hung up, I sat by the window and watched the street outside. Neighbors going about their day. Ordinary life. People with stories no one ever fully knows. That's when my phone rang again. A number I hadn't seen in a long time. "Angela Walker speaking," I said. "Miss Walker," a man replied warmly. "This is Thomas Reed, from Reed and Keller." I smiled faintly. "Thomas, it's been a while." "Yes, it has," he said. "I was going through some files and realized we never finalized your estate updates." "I was thinking the same thing," I said. "I believe it's time." We set a meeting for the following day. When I hung up, I didn't feel powerful. I felt grounded. Later that afternoon, Emily sent a photo in the family group chat, her parents standing proudly in front of a luxury resort. Daniel beside them, smiling but stiff. The caption read, "Making memories." I stared at the photo for a long moment. Then I closed the app. That evening, I received an unexpected knock at my door. It was Susan. She stood there alone, dressed neatly, her posture stiff with politeness. "Angela," she said, surprised. "I hope this isn't too sudden." "Not at all," I replied, stepping aside. "Please, come in." She looked around my home as she entered, not rudely, just assessing. "It's very cozy," she said. "Thank you," I replied. We sat in the living room. I offered her tea. She declined. "I'll be brief," she said. "I wanted to speak with you privately." "Of course." She folded her hands in her lap. "I hope you understand that our intentions have never been unkind." "I believe you," I said. She seemed relieved. "Emily is sensitive about appearances, about impressions. She wants everything to feel balanced." "Balanced," I repeated. Susan nodded. "Daniel has worked very hard to rise above his beginnings." I looked at her calmly. "His beginnings were love, hard work, and sacrifice." She smiled thinly. "Of course, I meant financially." "I see." She hesitated, then continued. "We worry that certain differences could cause discomfort. For him." "For whom?" I asked gently. "For everyone," she said quickly. I let the silence stretch. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I hope you don't feel excluded." "I don't," I said. "I feel informed." She blinked. "Informed?" "Yes," I said softly. "I now know exactly where I stand." Susan shifted uncomfortably. "Angela, please understand I do." I interrupted kindly. "More than you realize." She stood up soon after. As she reached the door, she turned back. "You've raised a wonderful son." "I know," I replied. When she left, I closed the door gently. That conversation confirmed everything. They weren't cruel people. They were careful people, and careful people often hurt others without ever feeling guilty. The next day, I met with Thomas. He listened as I spoke, calmly, clearly. "I want everything transparent," I said. "No surprises, no confusion." He nodded. "Of course." When I left his office, I felt lighter, not because I was planning something dramatic, but because I had stopped hiding. That evening, Daniel returned from the trip. He came over unannounced. "Mom," he said as soon as I opened the door, pulling me into a hug. "I missed you." "I'm glad you're home," I said. He looked tired, thoughtful. "They talked a lot," he admitted. About the future, about expectations, and what did you think? I asked. He hesitated. I don't know anymore. We sat down. Mom, he said quietly, do you ever feel like people don't really see you? I smiled sadly. More often than you think. He looked at me then. Really looked, I think. I've been blind, he said. I didn't rush him. I didn't correct him. I just listened. The next day, Emily called. Her voice was tight, controlled. Angela, she said. My mother mentioned she visited you. Yes, I replied. She may have spoken out of turn, Emily said. I hope there are no misunderstandings. There aren't, I said calmly. She paused. Good, because Daniel and I are discussing some things. I'm sure you are, she exhaled sharply. We want harmony. So do I said. Then she said something that changed everything. I just think it would help if you knew your place in certain situations. There it was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, Emily, my place has never been small. I just chose not to take up space. Silence. I hope you enjoy your evening, I added gently, and I hung up. That night, Daniel came back. Mom, he said, shaken. Emily told me about your conversation. I imagine she did. She said you sounded different. I am, I said. He sat down slowly. Why didn't you ever tell me? Tell you what? I asked. About your life, your success. I looked at him with tenderness. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, I said. Not what I have. Tears filled his eyes. I failed you, he whispered. No, I said, placing my hand over his. You're learning, and that was the true turning point, not the reveal, not the money, but the moment my son finally saw me. The morning after Daniel sat in my living room and finally saw me, I woke up feeling older, not tired, not broken, just older in the way you feel when something important has shifted. The sun came through the curtains softly. I stayed in bed longer than usual, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood waking up. A car door closing, a dog barking once and then stopping, someone sweeping outside. Ordinary sounds, yet everything felt different. I made my coffee slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't check my phone right away. I let myself breathe. When I finally sat at the table, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Mom, Emily and I talked all night. I'm coming over later. There are things you should hear. I stared at the message for a long time, not because I was afraid, but because I knew this conversation would hurt someone, and this time, it wouldn't be me. Daniel arrived just after noon. Emily was with him. She looked different. No perfect posture, no polished smile. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes tired. Angela, she said softly. I nodded. Emily, please, come in. We sat in the living room, the same room where Daniel had grown up, the same couch where he once cried over a failed exam, where he laughed too loudly watching late-night shows. Emily looked around, really looked this time. You raised him here, she said quietly. Yes, I replied. Every part of him. Daniel cleared his throat. Emily wants to talk. She took a breath. Then another. I didn't sleep, she said. Not after yesterday. I waited. My parents called me, she continued. They were upset, angry, confused. Daniel's jaw tightened. They said you were disrespectful, Emily said, looking at me. They said you embarrassed them. I met her eyes calmly. And what do you think? She swallowed. I think they were afraid. That surprised me. Afraid? I asked gently. Yes, she said. Afraid of being seen. She folded her hands together tightly. They've built their lives on looking untouchable, superior. When you didn't react the way they expected, it shook them. Daniel nodded. Slowly, they wanted you to shrink. I said nothing. Emily's voice trembled. I didn't stop them. The words hung heavy in the room. I didn't stop them for years, she went on. I told myself it was normal, that this was how love looked. Her eyes filled. Control, criticism, conditions. She looked at me. When you stayed calm, when you didn't beg or defend yourself, something broke inside me. I leaned forward slightly. What broke? The The lie, she whispered. Daniel reached for her hand. My parents told me I owed them, Emily continued. Because they paid for things. Because they gave me a life, I nodded slowly. Fear can disguise itself as gratitude. She looked startled, then nodded. Yes, exactly, Daniel spoke up. They told us this morning they're reconsidering their financial support. Emily laughed softly, bitterly. As punishment, I exhaled slowly. And how do you feel about that? I asked. Daniel answered first. Relieved, Emily blinked, then nodded. Me too. She looked down. They said if we keep choosing you, we're choosing disloyalty. I smiled sadly. Love isn't a competition. Emily's tears fell freely now. I see that. She wiped her face quickly. I wanted to apologize, not just for the dinner, but for every moment I stayed silent. I stood up. She froze, unsure. I walked over and sat beside her. Emily, I said softly, apologies matter only when they come with change. She nodded eagerly. I want to change. I believe you, I said. Daniel let out a breath he'd been holding. That afternoon, we talked for hours, not arguing, not accusing, just unpacking. Emily talked about her childhood, the pressure, the comparisons, how love always came with expectations. They never hugged me without correcting something. She said quietly. Daniel talked about trying to fit in, about feeling like he was always being measured. They never said it outright, he said, but I always felt smaller around them. I listened, and for the first time, they listened to me. I told them about choosing simplicity, about walking away from environments that demanded performance instead of peace. I never wanted power over people, I said. I wanted freedom within myself. Emily looked at me with something new in her eyes. Respect. That evening, they left quietly. Emily hugged me. Long, tight. Thank you for not hating me, she whispered. I don't hate wounded people, I replied. I hope they heal. 2 days later, the storm arrived, not loudly, through messages. Daniel called me, his voice steady but heavy. They came over, he said. Unannounced, I closed my eyes briefly. What happened? They accused us of being manipulated, he said. They said you poisoned us. I sighed softly. They told Emily she was throwing her life away, he continued. They said she was choosing struggle over security. And what did Emily say? I asked. He paused. She said security without dignity isn't safety. I smiled. They didn't like that, he added. I imagine not. They said if we go through with this setting boundaries, they're done. Silence. And how do you feel? I asked gently. Daniel's voice cracked. Scared, but free. That night, Emily sent me a message. Angela, I stood up to them. I've never done that before. I was shaking, but I didn't back down. I replied simply, I'm proud of you. The following week was quiet. 2 quiet.no calls from Susan. No messages from her husband. No family group chat updates. Then one afternoon, I received a letter, handwritten, from Susan. She wrote about disappointment, about betrayal, about sacrifice. She wrote about how they had worked too hard to be treated this way. She never asked how I felt. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Some conversations and not with words, but with silence. Daniel and Emily came over that weekend. They looked lighter, not happier, but steadier. We're moving into a smaller place, Daniel said. Emily nodded. Closer to the city. Less influence. I smiled. That sounds like freedom. Emily hesitated. They cut us off. I waited. Financially, she added. Every account, every promise. And I asked. Daniel laughed softly. And nothing. Emily laughed too. We're fine. They looked at each other. Really looked. We'll build our own life. Daniel said. Emily nodded. Slowly. Honestly, that night after they left, I sat by the window again. The same spot, the same street, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace without tension. Days passed, then weeks. One morning, while walking through the park, I sat on a bench beside an elderly woman feeding birds. She smiled at me. Beautiful day. Yes, I replied. She looked at the children playing nearby. People forget how little they need to be happy, I nodded, and how much they carry that isn't theirs. She laughed softly. We invent ladders, and then spend our lives climbing them, I smiled, only to realize we were standing tall all along. She patted my hand gently. Exactly. When I got home, I felt whole. Later that evening, Daniel texted me, "Mom, thank you for standing your ground. You changed everything," I replied. No. You did. That night, I slept deeply. No restlessness. No replaying conversations, just quiet, because sometimes resolution doesn't come with apologies. It comes with boundaries, and sometimes love survives only when control is removed. 3 days passed without a word from Emily. No messages, no calls. I didn't worry. Some realizations need silence to settle. That afternoon, I was watering the plants on my porch when I saw her car pull up slowly. She sat inside for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. I didn't rush her. When she finally stepped out, she looked nothing like the woman from that dinner night. No makeup, no heels, no designer bag, just simple clothes, a soft sweater, flat shoes. She looked real. I opened the door before she knocked. "Angela," she said quietly. "Emily," I replied. "Come in." She hesitated for half a second, then stepped inside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Daniel once did homework, the same table where life had always been honest. Emily placed her phone face down. She wasn't here to be distracted. She folded her hands together. "I came alone," she said. "I needed to." I nodded. "Take your time." She swallowed. "I've been replaying that night," she said. "Every word, every look." She paused, and I realized something painful. I waited. "I've spent my whole life performing," she said softly, "for approval, for safety." Her voice shook. "Even with you, I felt no anger, only understanding. My parents taught me that love is earned," she continued. "That respect comes from status. That silence keeps peace." She looked up at me. I believed them. I leaned back slightly. "Beliefs learned in fear are hard to unlearn." Emily nodded slowly. "When you stayed calm, when you didn't fight back, it terrified me." "Why?" I asked gently. "Because I couldn't control you," she admitted. "And because you weren't afraid." She took a deep breath. "I want to apologize," she said. "Not politely, not socially." She stood up suddenly. I was surprised. She bowed her head slightly. "I'm sorry for letting you be disrespected," she said. "I'm sorry for confusing silence with loyalty." Her voice broke. "And I'm sorry for not seeing you as a full person." I stood up too. "Emily," I said softly, "sit down." She did. "I don't need apologies wrapped in shame," I said. "I need truth." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "The truth is," she said, "I was scared of my parents." I nodded. "That's honest. They trained me to obey," she continued, "to feel guilty for wanting peace." I looked at her carefully. "And now," she met my eyes, "now I'm tired." That single word said everything. Tired of performing, tired of pleasing, tired of shrinking. She looked around the kitchen. "This place feels safe." "It is," I said, "because nothing here needs to impress." She smiled weakly. "I want to learn how to live like that," she said. "Not copy you, but understand it." I shook my head gently. "I can't teach you that." She looked confused. "Peace isn't taught," I said. "It's chosen, and then chosen again." She nodded slowly. "I used to think humility meant having nothing," she said. "Now I see it means not needing to prove." I smiled. "That realization changes everything." She leaned forward. "My parents called again." I stayed quiet. "They said if we keep our distance, they'll remove us from everything," she said. "Inheritance, connections, support." She laughed softly. "They called it motivation." "And how did that make you feel?" I asked. "Small," she said honestly. For a moment, then she looked up. "And then angry." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Not loud anger," she clarified. "Clear anger." She straightened her shoulders. "They don't own me." I felt a warmth in my chest. "That's an important sentence," I said. She nodded. Daniel and I talked. We agreed on boundaries. I waited. No surprise visits, she said. No insults disguised as advice. No money with conditions. She smiled sadly. They didn't accept it, I nodded. People who benefit from control rarely do, Emily sighed. They said I was ungrateful, and what did you say? I asked. I said gratitude doesn't mean submission. I smiled. That came from you, she said quietly. I shook my head. It came from you. She looked down. I've never felt lighter and heavier at the same time, she admitted. That's growth, I said. It weighs before it frees. She was quiet for a while. Then she asked softly, how did you do it? Do what? I asked. Walk away from expectations, she said. Without bitterness, I thought for a moment. I didn't walk away from people, I said. I walked toward myself. She nodded slowly. I don't want to repeat the cycle, she said. If we have children one day. I met her eyes. I don't want them to think love hurts, she finished. That intention already makes you different, I said. She smiled through tears. We sat in silence for a while, not awkward, not tense, comfortable. Before she left, she stood by the door. Angela, she said, I don't expect forgiveness. I shook my head gently. Forgiveness isn't a gift you earn. It's something I choose. She nodded, and I choose to move forward, I added. With honesty, she hugged me, not tight, not desperate, just sincere. Thank you, she whispered, for not becoming what hurt you. When she drove away, I didn't feel relief. I felt hope, because sometimes healing doesn't come from fixing the past. It comes from refusing to repeat it. That evening, Daniel came by alone. He didn't call first. He didn't need to. I heard his key in the door, slow and careful, like he wasn't sure if he deserved to enter. Mom, he said softly. I looked up from the couch. His shoulders were tense, his eyes tired. Come sit, I said. He sat across from me, rubbing his hands together the way he did when he was a boy trying to explain something hard. I talked to Emily's parents, he said. I waited. It didn't go well. I nodded. I already knew. They said I changed, he continued, that Emily was being influenced. I smiled faintly. That's often what control sounds like when it's challenged. He exhaled slowly. They blamed you, he admitted. Said, you embarrassed them, that you humiliated their family. And how did that make you feel? I asked. He looked up, angry, not defensive, just clear. I leaned back. For the first time, he said, I wasn't scared of losing their approval. That mattered more than anything he could have said. They offered money, he added quietly. I raised an eyebrow. Not directly, he said. They called it support, help, security, and the condition? I asked. He swallowed. That we apologize, that we distance ourselves from you. The room went quiet. I didn't react. I told them no, he said. Just like that. No drama. No speech, just no. They said I was choosing poverty, he added. I smiled sadly. People who fear poverty usually confuse it with dignity. Daniel nodded. They said Emily owed them her life, he said. That without them, she'd be nothing. My chest tightened, not with anger, but sadness. They raised her with fear, I said. Fear is loud when it's threatened. He leaned forward. Mom, I should have spoken up sooner. I reached out and placed my hand over his. You spoke when it mattered, I said. That's what counts. He closed his eyes for a moment. I didn't realize how much pressure she was under, he admitted. How much she'd been taught to obey. That kind of obedience doesn't come from love, I said. It comes from survival. He nodded slowly. That night, Daniel stayed for dinner. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The next morning, Emily called. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the strain beneath it. They've stopped responding, she said. No messages. No answers. I paused. How does that feel? She was quiet. Scary, she admitted. And relieving. Both things can exist at once. They sent one message, she added. Just one. I waited. They said if we don't come to our senses, we're on our own. And what does on your own mean to them? I asked. She let out a short laugh. No money, no introductions, no safety net. And what does it mean to you? I asked. She took a breath. It means we build our own life. I smiled. That's not abandonment, I said. That's independence. Over the next few days, the pressure increased. Emails, voicemails, long messages filled with guilt disguised as concern. They warned Emily she was making a mistake. They warned Daniel he was being manipulated. They warned them both that pride would ruin them. Emily read every message once, then she stopped. I don't want their voices in my head anymore, she told me. That was the moment I knew she was changing, not reacting, not rebelling, choosing. A week later, Clarence showed up unannounced at Daniel and Emily's apartment. He didn't knock, he let himself in. Daniel stood between him and Emily. You can't come in like this, Daniel said calmly. Clarence scoffed. This is my daughter's home. No, Daniel replied. It's ours. That word ours landed hard. Clarence laughed bitterly. You think you can survive without us? Daniel didn't raise his voice. We already are. Clarence turned to Emily. You're throwing everything away, he said. For what? Pride? Emily met his eyes. For peace, she said. Clarence's face hardened. You'll regret this, he said. Emily nodded. Maybe, but I won't resent myself. That was when Lorraine spoke. After everything we've done for you, she said softly, this is how you repay us. Emily's voice stayed gentle. You didn't raise me to be loved, she said. You raised me to be controlled. Lorraine gasped like she'd been struck. Clarence grabbed his coat. We're done, he said. Don't call us when life gets hard. Daniel held the door open. Take care, he said. After they left, Emily sat on the floor, not crying, just breathing. Daniel sat beside her. They held hands. Nothing dramatic, just two people choosing the harder path. Emily came to see me later that night. She looked exhausted but lighter. I feel like I jumped off a cliff, she said, and discovered you could fly. I replied. She smiled faintly. I don't know what comes next, she said. No one ever does, I said. That's not a weakness, she nodded. I used to think security came from money, she said. Now I think it comes from alignment. That word alignment stayed with me. Over the next month, things shifted. Emily's parents cut financial TIs. They removed Emily from family accounts. They told relatives their version of the story. Some believed them, some didn't. Emily stopped explaining. Daniel took on extra work. Emily simplified her life. They canceled a planned vacation. They downsized their expectations, and somehow they smiled more. One evening, Daniel told me something that stayed with me. We sleep better now, he said. Even with less. That's when I knew the boundaries were working. Boundaries don't make life easier, they make it truer. Emily started therapy, not to fix herself but to understand herself. She began noticing patterns, how she apologized for taking space, how she flinched at disapproval, how she mistook silence for safety. Each realization hurt and healed. One afternoon, she told me, I don't feel owned anymore. That sentence was everything. Clarence and Lorraine tried one last time, a formal letter, cold, polite, final. They offered reconciliation on their terms, apologies from Daniel, distance from me, public unity. Emily read the letter, then she folded it neatly and put it away. No response? Daniel asked. No, she said. Some messages don't deserve echoes. When she told me, I felt something settle inside me, not victory, peace, because I hadn't won anything. I had simply stood still while others revealed themselves, and now my son and daughter-in-law were learning to do the same. After the call stopped, something unexpected happened. Life became quiet, not the painful kind of quiet that feels like rejection, but the kind that gives you room to breathe. I woke up one morning and realized my phone had no new messages, no guilt, no demands, no hidden pressure dressed as concern, just silence. I made my tea slowly that day. I stood by the kitchen window and watched the sun touch the tops of the trees. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt light. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I felt steady. That afternoon, I went for a walk alone. The neighborhood hadn't changed, but I had. I noticed small things I used to rush past. A woman laughing on her porch. A man watering plants with care. Children chalking crooked hearts on the sidewalk. Ordinary life, the kind that doesn't need approval. I thought about all the years I spent shrinking myself, not loudly, just subtly, lowering my voice, softening my opinions, making myself easier to accept. I thought that was kindness, but kindness that costs you your dignity is not kindness at all. That evening, Daniel came by again. He didn't bring problems. He didn't bring updates. He brought groceries. I figured I'd cook, he said. I watched him move around the kitchen, careful but comfortable. You okay? He asked gently. I nodded. I am. He paused. Really? Yes, I said. Really? We ate together at the table, just the two of us. No tension. No explanations. After dinner, he said something that surprised me. I didn't realize how much I was holding my breath before. He admitted. I looked at him. With them, he continued. I was always bracing, waiting to be judged, to be corrected, and now, I asked, now I feel taller, he said softly. I smiled. That's what happens when you stop bending. Emily came over a few days later. She looked different, not in her clothes, not in her hair, in her posture. She sat straighter. She spoke slower. I started writing things down. She told me. What kind of things? I asked. The moments I ignore myself, she said. And why? That took courage, I realized. I confuse peace with approval, she admitted. That's very common, I said. Especially for people raised on conditions, she nodded. They loved me, she said. But only when I performed. I didn't interrupt. Now, she continued, I'm learning to sit with discomfort without running back to them. That's not easy work. That's how you grow, I said. She smiled faintly. I wanted to thank you, she said. For what? I asked. For not rescuing me, she replied. For letting me face this myself. That meant more than she knew. Because love isn't fixing, it's trusting. As days passed, stories began reaching us, relatives calling Daniel, friends asking Emily what really happened. Some were curious, some were judgmental. Emily stopped explaining. She learned that clarity doesn't require witnesses. One afternoon, I received a message from Lorraine. Just one. It was short, cold, polite. She wrote that she hoped I was well, that misunderstandings happen, that families should move forward. There was no apology. No ownership, just an attempt to close the chapter without reading it. I didn't reply, not out of spite, out of completion, because not every door needs to be slammed. Some are simply no longer yours to open. That night, I sat alone in my living room. The lamp was low, the house quiet. I thought about the word family. How easily it's used to excuse harm, how often we're told to endure because of blood. But blood does not give permission, love does not mean surrender, and respect is not optional. I realized something else too. I hadn't lost anything. I had only stopped pretending. Emily and Daniel began building new routines, simple ones, Sunday walks, shared meals, long conversations without interruptions. They didn't fill their time with distractions, they filled it with presence. One evening, Emily said something quietly powerful. I don't feel like I'm running anymore. That's when healing starts, when survival mode ends. Weeks passed, then months. The noise never returned. Clarence and Lorraine stayed distant, not healed, just silent, and that was okay, because silence without fear is freedom. One morning, Emily came by early. She held a cup of coffee in both hands. I had a dream, she said. In it, I was standing in a room full of mirrors, she explained, and none of them were judging me. I smiled. That's not a dream, I said. That's self-respect waking up. She laughed softly. I used to think love meant being chosen, she said. Now I think it means being seen. Yes, I said. And choosing yourself when no one else will. Later that day, I sat by the window again, same place, same chair, but a different woman. I thought about how this story began with exclusion, with rejection, with words that cut quietly, and how it was ending with clarity, with boundaries, with peace. Not every story ends in reunion. Some end in truth, and sometimes truth is enough.
As time went on, I noticed something quietly beautiful. I was no longer replaying conversations in my head. I wasn't waking up at night wondering what I should have said differently, or how I could have softened myself more. That habit was gone. Instead, my mornings felt slower, my thoughts felt lighter. I realized how much energy I had spent managing other people's comfort, making sure no one felt challenged by my presence, making sure I didn't take up too much space. I used to believe that was love. Now I understand it was fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being left behind, fear of standing alone. But standing alone, I learned, is not the same as being lonely. Some days, I sat with my tea and simply listened to the house breathe. The soft ticking of the clock, the distant sound of cars passing by. There was peace in that stillness. Daniel changed too. He spoke more openly. He laughed more freely. He no longer asked permission before making decisions. He trusted his instincts. Again, one evening, he said something that stayed with me. I didn't lose my family, he said. I just stopped confusing control with love. That sentence felt like a door closing gently and another opening. Emily continued her quiet work. She didn't announce her growth. She lived it. She stopped apologizing for rest. She stopped explaining her boundaries. She learned that discomfort does not mean danger, and that saying no does not make you cruel. Watching her step into herself was deeply moving, not because she became stronger, but because she became honest. I often thought about Clarence and Lorraine, not with bitterness, with understanding. They had built their lives on fear of loss, fear of slipping back into nothingness. And fear makes people cling tightly even to people they love. But fear cannot lead a family, only trust can. I didn't wish them harm. I didn't wish them lessons. I simply wished them clarity. And then I let them go. One afternoon, as the sun lowered outside my window, I felt something settle deep inside me. I had nothing left to prove, not to them, not to anyone. I had lived my life with intention, with honesty. I had raised my son with love, and now I was allowing him to live as his own man. That is not loss. That is completion. I realized something else too. I never needed to pretend to be smaller to be accepted. I never needed to hide my strength to keep peace. Peace does not come from silence. It comes from alignment. When your words match your values, when your choices match your truth, that is real wealth. Not money, not approval, but the ability to sit quietly with yourself and feel no shame. As the days passed, I smiled more, not because life was perfect, but because it was honest. And that, I learned, is enough. As this story comes to a close, I hope it reminded you of something important. That dignity doesn't come from how much money you have, how you dress, or how others choose to see you. It comes from knowing your worth, even when the world tries to overlook it. Sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest truths, and sometimes walking away with peace is the greatest victory of all. If this story touched your heart, made you think, or felt a little too familiar, you're not alone. These stories are told for people who have been underestimated, judged too quickly, or loved deeply without always being understood. Before you go, take a moment to like this video. It truly helps more stories like this reach the people who need them most. And if you enjoy thoughtful, emotional stories with meaning, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of yourself.